Okay, you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia on Comcast Channel 66 and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website at www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we will be joined by former council member and mayoral candidate Derek Green to discuss why he left the mayoral race. Lance Haver will provide us with an update on the water rate hearings, and Denise Clay-Murray will preview her Friday column with us. Lance, how are you tonight?
I'm all right. How about you?
Very good. It's good to see you.
I saw your son had a trip to the zoo.
Yes, he did. He did. He enjoyed that.
Does he have a favorite animal yet?
Well, anything with cats, because we have cats in the house. So any cat he's thrilled with. He's 2. For anybody who doesn't know, and he's fascinated by cats. So that's always, and we saw a lot of cats. They were moving around today, that day. So he's
next year. Well. Next year it'll be dinosaurs. You'll have to go someplace else to see those.
Oh no, we already got the dinosaurs going. He's already talking about going to the Natural History Museum next weekend. So that's probably what we're going to do. So Lance, there's a lot going on in the city. Oh, and Denise Clay-Murray is here with us.
Hi guys.
Hi Denise. How are you?
I'm good. I heard you talking about dinosaurs. For those of you who are like Abbott Elementary fans, they're doing their season finale, which puts them at the Franklin Institute tonight at 9 o'clock on 6 ABC. So when you said dinosaurs, that just popped into my head for some reason.
All right. Well, Lance, you have an update for us on the water rate hearings. What's going on there?
Well, let me give a little background. The water department was given 2 consecutive rate increases. Last year, the rates went up. The prior years, the rates went up. They also have gotten a large amount of money from the federal government through what they call the COVID dollars, the American Recovery Plan Act. And there's a huge budget surplus in the city that city council has asked the mayor to use so that no water rate increase would be necessary. 14 to 17 members of city council sent a letter to the water department saying, please withdraw your request for a 21% rate increase. Now, for those of us who don't know, the water department is owned by the city of Philadelphia. The water commissioner is hired by the mayor, and the mayor wants to use that money for other things, including reducing the business taxes. So the water commissioner is in a very awkward position where his boss is saying, I don't want to give you any of that money. And now the water commissioner is saying, well, I guess we're going to have to raise rates instead. So they filed for a rate increase, as I said, 21%. The hearing process goes forward. Now, the public isn't actually represented. There is something called the public advocate, but the public advocate doesn't represent the public. The public advocate represents the Philadelphia Water Rate Board, which is appointed by the mayor, has 5 members, former water commissioners 1, former chief legal counsel for PGWs 2, there are 2 developers, and a consumer representative. They're appointed by the mayor. They are the ones who decide whether the rates should go up or not. They then hire as their consultant the public advocate to work for them. So the public's completely shut out. There's a filing, and then there's a rate case that goes forward where there are public hearings. And unfortunately, what we know is because the public advocate doesn't represent the public, they have no client group, and they do very little in the way of research. And very little in the way of outreach. So they don't try and get people to come to the hearings. They don't try and speak with the council people who are opposed to the rate increase. And they don't do any outreach to civic groups to get them to come to the hearings. So we have a little bit of understanding of what's happening so far. The public has showed up. The original filings have been made. And we're going to have technical hearings coming up soon where we'll have more of an opportunity to learn more. But I wanted to go forward what we've learned so far. And I have a little slideshow. I am going to interrupt myself because I have some remarks from the hearing examiner that I find so horrifying, I want to read verbatim. So what have we learned so far? The water department is spending $2 million on its office renovations. And it's not just this one year, it's been doing it continually. As they raise rates, they continue to renovate their office space. Now, their office space is very nice. It's at 1101 Market. For those people who don't know that building, it was the former ARA Tower. It's now owned by Jefferson. Center City Real Estate, among the highest per square foot real estate in the city. It's great, but apparently it wasn't great enough in the way it is. They decided to spend $2 million renovating it. Now, before we go on too much more, I want to say this has become an issue for the public to be concerned about. I mean, most people don't like to see their money wasted, and most people are horrified to find out that while the water department is claiming they are broke, they don't have any money, they have to raise rates, they're spending millions of dollars renovating their office space. So at the public hearing, a woman showed up, just a rank and file constituent, no experience, not a lawyer, not an expert, just someone who pays the bills and is angry about it. And she says, I've been told that the water department is spending millions of dollars to renovate the office space. And the hearing examiner, whose name is Marlena Chestnut, says to her, is your question, are they renovating their office? I'm a participant in the hearings. I said to the hearing examiner, yes, that was her question. Yes. Ms. Shedrick, who was the consumer who showed up, said, yes, well, I understand that the offices are currently under renovation, and I was wondering if there's been an internal budget cuts to reduce the cost, or, how are those renovations being paid for? Seems very reasonable. We're paying higher rates. They're spending the money repainting their walls, putting down new carpet. Might be a little upsetting. Here's what the hearing officer says. Ms. Chestnut, okay, Mr. Schultz, deputy mayor for the water department, maybe you could prepare a response from Ms. Shedrick about that and get back to her. I say, couldn't we hear today whether they are renovating their offices? Hearing examiner says, I'm not sure the deputy mayor for water commissioner is in a position. If he can answer, sure. And I say, are the offices being renovated? Hearing examiner says, I'm not sure he's able to answer that. Mr. Schultz, deputy water commissioner, can you answer? The deputy water commissioner says, quote, I do not know the answer to that specific question. And then I ask, is there anybody else? There are over 15 people from the water department at the hearings. Is there anyone else from the water department who can answer whether their own offices are being renovated? The hearing examiner says, well, that wasn't the purpose of this hearing. It was to hear from people about their pending rate increases. So she didn't ask anybody from the water department if they could answer. And the one person who we know could answer, she didn't get them to answer. Instead, after the public hearing's over and after everybody goes home, although going home is virtually going home because it's all done virtually on Zoom, then the water department doesn't answer. I filed a formal discovery request and I get the answer. $2 million being spent renovating their offices.
So,
Now,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are a couple of things here. First of all, the idea that the question about them renovating their offices is not germane to the idea of a rate increase is insane to me, because it absolutely is. All right. The second thing is nobody there knows if this is happening, supposedly. I'm in an office right now in my house. I would know if it's being renovated.
especially
I'm in it.
Especially if you were the deputy commissioner.
And I'm still kind of stuck on the fact that you can't cut rates. You got to jack up the rates to finish the renovation. That's insane.
I just think we all ought to recognize how bad the situation is for us. When you have a hearing examiner who tells the executives at the water department, you don't have to tell us whether you're renovating your offices. You can wait till there's no more public hearing. You can wait until everyone's no longer paying attention, and then you can say it.
That's right.
And when I filed a discovery request, I said, I want to know over the last 3 years, how much have you spent? The water department objected. They said, I couldn't know that. I can only go back 1 year. Now, I eventually got all the information, but it's just, if the hearing examiner is so unfair and so biased towards the water department that she will allow them to escape public scrutiny and allow them to escape public criticism for wasting our money on renovations when they say they don't have the money, how much can we trust her to come up with a fair decision? I did some more digging and some more research. So the water department square foot at the 11th and Market is 110,000 square feet. The department occupies the 2nd through the 6th floors. They've entered into a long-term lease. They have no documents, absolutely no documents showing that they've done anything to try and lower their office space rent. No documents showing they went to Broad and Olney, or one of the other neighborhoods in Philadelphia that really would benefit from the water department headquarters being there. I mean, Center City, if we are to believe the Center City reports, Center City is doing well. It's actually improving, continuing to improve. Mr. Levy, who's the head of the Center City Business District, talks about how everything's coming back. If you've been to Broad and Olney recently, you would know that that's not an intersection or a neighborhood that's coming back. And if the water department moved from the high-priced office space at 1101 Market Street to Broad and Olney, not only would it save literally millions of dollars in rent, it would be an infusion into money into a neighborhood that's struggling. And it's a neighborhood that should be saved. Girls High is there, Central's there. There's Einstein Hospital is there, which is now owned by Jefferson. It's a neighborhood that with a little bit of help can turn around. But instead, the water department is keeping its headquarters at 1101 Market Street, paying these high rents and paying millions of dollars to renovate it. We also know now that instead of hiring consultants to look for cost savings, the water department hired consultants to argue for the rate increase. What they say, and again, I'm going to read this, is cost control at the Philadelphia Water Department starts with budgeting. PWD has a vigorous budget process through which all program managers submit and justify their budgets to senior management. Now, of course, that's got nothing to do with cost savings. It doesn't have anything to do with hiring consultants to look at the operations and say, you could save a few million here, you could save a few million there. It doesn't have anything to do with innovation. A lot of businesses have a program where the workers get a bonus if they help save the business money. Water department doesn't have one of those. No one at the water department is tasked with evaluating possible cost-saving measures. No one. But they will spend, and they won't tell us how much yet, but they will spend at least $1 million arguing, using consultants to say the rates aren't high enough. But they won't spend a single penny having those consultants go ahead and find ways to cut the rates. As we've talked about on the air before, the city of Philadelphia owns Philadelphia Gas Works, another municipal utility, which has its offices at 9th and Montgomery, and the Philadelphia Water Department. Both utilities read meters. Both utilities send out bills. Both utilities collect money. Both utilities have service centers. Both utilities have office space. There's absolutely no reason why they can't be combined. In other cities, like in Indianapolis, where there's municipal utilities, they're combined and they save money. Obviously, if we would have one meter reader for water and gas, one bill for water and gas, one collections for water and gas, we would save 50% of the cost.
Heck, in Delaware, Delmarva Power, I get my gas bill and my electric bill in the same thing.
Right. It is common. It is a common occurrence. It's even easier, though, when it's a municipal utility, because all the mayor has to do is say, I want this done, and it's done. But they're not doing it. They refuse to look at it, and as we'll get to in the end, the filing by the public advocate doesn't ask any of these questions. Not a single one of the things we're discussing now has been raised as an issue by the public advocate. The water department has failed to look at ways to lower its costs on buying. So it's true the water department faces some pressure, just like everybody else, there's inflation. But most of us facing inflationary pressure look for ways to save money, not the water department. The water department, again, has no consultants looking at this. It says it can't because the department does not control procurement of goods and services. It's controlled by another department of the city. But the water department avoids the obvious, which is the procurement commissioner and the water commissioner both work for the same man, the mayor of Philadelphia. And if the water department cared about saving money, it would go with the procurement commissioner to the mayor and say, we've got to do something because we're looking at a 21% increase in water rates. We've got to figure out a smarter way of buying our supplies, a smarter way of buying what we need, smarter way. Maybe it's working with other utilities. Maybe it's working with other municipalities. There is a buying co-op for municipal utilities that the water department and the gas works could join if they were so motivated to do. But again, because they always file for a rate increase and they always ask for more than what they want, and they always get close to 80% of what they ask for, the path of least resistance has been our pockets. And that's continuing. We'll get to the end where I'm going to tell you that the public advocate has already agreed to a massive rate increase. So it's going to be very hard with the hearing examiner, Ms. Chestnut, trying to protect the water department and not exposed to how they're wasting their money on office renovations, and the public advocate that works for the water rate board agreeing to massive rate increases on paper anyway. It's going to be very hard to defeat this. Asked directly about what the water department is doing to save money. One of the remarkable things is they say, oh, we're doing all these things, but there's absolutely nothing in the rate filing that shows how any of the things they're claiming will actually save money and lower the need for rates. Now, these are all things that we should be doing. They're great ideas, but the water department doesn't have to do them because they are going to get the rate increase anyway, unless there's a huge public outcry. And finally, the water department doesn't do what it can to use its resource to create jobs. And again, this gets a little technical. The city of Philadelphia has the right to take more water out of the Delaware and Schuylkill River than we're currently taking. The city, because it used to be much larger and used to have a manufacturing base, and the agreements are very old, we have the right to take more water out than what we're currently doing. And the real cost for most water is not on the water side, it's on the sewer side. As we recognize the danger of pollution downstream, the federal government and the state government rightly continues to say before you release the water, it has to be cleaner. And every couple of years we figure out whatever the level was 2 years ago that wasn't safe, we now have to lower it even more. And every year we read reports about how much plastic is in the water and how much medicine's in the water and how much bacteria is in the water. And it is somewhat scary. So the idea that we have to continue to improve the treatment of the water when we release it is accurate. But the fact is that we can take the water and use the water at much lower costs. And that's one of the great incentives for a bottling plant, like the Coca-Cola bottling plants or the Honickman family bottling plants, or even the recent factory that opened at Dietz and Watson. That water can be sold to create jobs and can be used as a way of bringing jobs back into the city of Philadelphia. The water department has nobody, absolutely nobody, trying to do that. Zero. They don't consider where the offices are when they contract out. For example, the water department has today $135 million in quote unquote a rate stabilization fund and another $15 million in excess fund. They have $150 million in the bank today as we're talking. That money could be in a credit union to help people buy homes, to help people buy cars, to help people have jobs. Or it could be in a commercial bank to help people buy cars, to help people buy homes, to help create jobs. But the water department refuses to do any of that. Instead, it's placed all of its money in U.S. Bank. U.S. Bank has no retail branches in the city of Philadelphia, doesn't try and give mortgages to the city of Philadelphia and doesn't try and give car loans to the city of Philadelphia. And while they may hire a few people here and there, because there are no retail branches, the number of people they're hiring are very, very low. So the water department could be a tool for economic development, both recruiting businesses that use water and by using its buying power to say, we're not going to put the money in a bank that doesn't have branches in Philadelphia, and we're not going to put the money in something that doesn't help us create economic wealth in the city. But it refuses to do that. One of the sadnesses is we talk about the mayor's race and we have a former controller running for mayor, is that the former controller never audited the water department. There's nobody who's looking out for us. No one who says, well, wait a minute, here's those $2 million being used to renovate the offices. Here's money that's wasted on these contracts. Many of us had to get our water meters replaced. The company that made the arrangements to get the workers out to replace the meters was based in Georgia. The meter reading people are based in Tennessee. You would think a controller would look at all these contracts and raise these issues, but unfortunately, we have not had a controller in the last 6 years who's been willing to look at the water department and say, you know what, here's possible cost savings so we don't have to raise the rates anymore. Finally, the hearing examiner, Marlena Chestnut, continues to say publicly that the water department and consumers want the same thing. And she believes it's two sides of a river and we should all sing Kumbaya and meet in the middle. What she says doesn't make any sense. And the reason for that is because the water commissioner who works for the mayor wants to protect the mayor. That's his boss. He doesn't want to say out loud that, yes, there's money in the ARPA funds, the American Recovery Plan Act, that money was set aside for COVID. The water commissioner doesn't want to say there's plenty of money there. If we use that money, we wouldn't need a rate increase, because that would make the mayor look bad. The water department not only wants a rate increase, but it also wants to protect the mayor. Consumers, on the other hand, don't want a rate increase and don't want to protect the mayor. We have absolutely no interest in helping the mayor look good. We want to help our budget and make our pocketbooks look good. So the idea that it's really the same things is a misnomer. And the idea that the hearing examiner is prejudiced in the true meaning of the word, that she has prejudged the case, that she has already decided that we all want the same thing, is an indication that she is unfit to serve as a hearing examiner. And when we have people who show up to testify at the public hearings and say this, the public deserves to know why Mayor Kenney feels it's appropriate to ask residents to bear higher costs when the city is sitting on billions of dollars that could wipe out the need for a 20% increase for water bills. The public deserves to know what obstacles may exist in allocating money from the city's general fund to the water department. And that came from an environmental advocate. The hearing examiners already decided that those concerns are meaningless because the water department and consumers want the same thing. And again, it simply isn't true. The water commissioner is conflicted. Obviously, he doesn't want to embarrass his boss. He doesn't want to call his boss out. He doesn't want to put himself in a position where he could be fired. So as a result, he says, well, we can't get any money from the city, so we have to raise rates. But he doesn't say the reason why we can't get the money from the city is because the mayor will not give it to us. As I said, we've already found out the hearing examiner has prejudged the case. And here's the exact word she says. The other thing I wanted to say was, and this kind of flows from my background and my experience, is that don't think of this as an adversarial proceeding. You may see yourself on a river where on one side and the water department is on the other. And you want one thing, which is low rates, and the water department wants another thing, which is high rates, so they don't have lots of money. But that's not the way it is. There's a bridge somewhere between you, and I'd like to think about that. We all want the same thing, but believe me, the water department does not want to have hot rates so high that you can't pay them. And again, this is the classic prejudicial ruling. Before hearing the facts, she has already decided that we all want the same things. When the public testimony clearly says we don't want the same things, we want the mayor to release the money so that no rate increase is necessary. And the water commissioner, again, no fault, I'm not blaming him, but he doesn't want to attack his boss. Who in their right mind wants to attack their boss? So the hearing examiner saying that we're all on the same side is just an example of how bad the situation is for us. And with that, unfortunately, I have to report the public advocate submitted their testimony 2 days ago, and they're already agreeing to at least $80 million in rate increases. And it's a little trickier because it's actually worse than that, because they're saying they want the water department to raise the rates, but they should be paid for not on water bills, but out of the city. Now, the water department, of course, is going to say, we'd like that too, but we can't do it. So that means that money is already going to be increased. So what we're really looking at is the water department getting, because the public advocates agreed already, the water department getting 85 to 90% of what they've asked for. And that is the charade. That is the joke. The water department knows politically they can't get everything they asked for. Public advocate knows they can't agree to everything. And the hearing examiner knows they can't give them everything. So the water department asks for more than what they want, goes through the machinations, then the rates go up not by 21%, by 18%. And the hearing examiner says, see, I did a good job. Public advocate says, see, I did a good job. The water rate board says, see, we did a good job. But the truth is the water department knew and knows that there is no way that they'll get everything they want. So they ask for more than what they need. And until we get to a point where someone has the backbone to say no rate increase until you do everything you can to cut costs, the path of least resistance will still be our pocketbooks and our wallets.
I'm still stuck on the renovations personally.
Yeah. That's just insulting. I mean, that's like salt in the wound. It's like you care so little about us that you'll take our money and you'll put in new carpeting and buy yourselves new desks. It's, the water department spends a lot of money, and $2 million may not be a lot of money, but it tells you about their mindset. Instead of conserving, instead of doing what they can, instead of moving their offices to a lower rent district, they're going to actually fix up their fancy offices and tell us it's a shame, but you're just going to have to pay for it.
The worst part about this is that you're the only one asking these questions. The people who have these positions are not doing that.
Right. In the past, the Inquirer had reporters who could cover it. The difficulty in the news media and newspapers right now is that the newspapers keep letting go their older reporters who have an institutional history with these things, and they keep cutting back, and they don't have the resources. Not a single Inquirer reporter covered any of the public hearings. Not a single Inquirer reporter has done anything other than write off the press release. And what will happen is when the rate increase will go through, the Inquirer, because they have no institutional history, will say, oh, look, the system worked. They asked for a 21% increase. They got an 18% increase. So everyone should be happy. They got less than what they asked for. But it's rigged, and it's rigged against us. It's like people when they buy new used cars. It's rare that the car dealership really wants to get what they ask for. They expect you to bargain, and they expect you to offer less, and that's how the system works. The water department asks for more than what it needs, expects everyone to attack it, and then takes 10 or 15% less than what they asked for very happily.
Well, Lance, thank you so much for doing that, and there's still more to come in this.
And hopefully the new controller will go ahead and audit the water department. We can always hope for a controller who cares about working people.
Yep.
But FYI, before we get off of this topic, on Monday, May 1st at 1 p.m., the Committee on Transportation and Public Utilities is going to have a hearing into the water rates.
Well, that'll be great. I'll certainly be there, and I hope some of our other listeners will come out and bring pictures of the office renovations.
Yeah,
I'll
for
say.
no other reason, but we should see what we're paying
Right.
for.
Right.
It's a very hard building to get into these days. I don't know if you've tried, but one of the things the water commissioner gets in that fancy rent is a very secure place. You can't even get in and push the buttons on the elevator. They have to give you a
Wow.
pass. They have to give you a pass to use the elevator. So I'll try and get in to take some pictures. I'll use my press credentials and see what happens.
All right. Well, Lance, thank you so much. So another mayoral candidate withdrew from the race. That's former council member Derek Green. And Denise and I spoke with him earlier this week about that decision and where he goes from here.
And you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5, and we are here with Derek Green, who a former city council member who was one of the folks running for mayor this time around, and he just announced last week that he was dropping out of the race. So we wanted to have him on to kind of talk a little bit about not only what the decision to drop out, but what's next for him. So thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be with both of you once again, as always. And thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation and dialogue with those who are watching and those who are listening.
Well, thank you. So I guess my first question for you is, and it's kind of the obvious question, which is what made you decide to drop out?
Well, when I had a chance to really think through the next steps of this race, and when Maria Cano Sanchez just made her decision, and actually the undecided numbers went up after she left, and looking at recent polls and looking at my poll numbers, and although my commercial helped move the needle, and I had another commercial we were about to air, but the amount of money and resources it just takes now to be able to run, you either have to be independently wealthy or have a super PAC. And as someone who's campaigned for ethics reform, done a lot of work in the space of campaign finance reform, as well as advocated for public financing of campaigns, talking with my team and just saying the amount of money that need to be spent to move the needle with those undecided was just such an exorbitant amount of money. Also, with the other campaigns having that type of resources, this made it very challenging. And so just reflecting on all of those perspectives made my decision when I did.
Did it also did the amount of candidates also have an impact on that? Because you've got a lot of people that are still in this race.
Well, this is a very unique race, unique in the modern history of local politics. If you think about the 2015 race, the 2007 race, the 1999 race, and the 1991 race, when we've had an open mayoral election, we've never had this many currently elected officials at a local level all run at the same time. In fact, think about 2015, you had Jim Kennedy. Think about in 2007, you had Michael Nutter. Think about in 1999, you had John Street. And in 1991, you had Ed Rendell. And historically, there's been maybe one current local elected official that's running, current local elected official that's running, and then multiple other candidates who may be state officials or members of Congress or business people that decide to run. This race was unique when you think about the number of local elected officials that were currently in office who decided to run, and even just citywide elected officials. You had 4 current elected officials who had been successful in multiple terms, who have been elected citywide. So I think that also created a very unique perspective in this race. I don't think everyone thought everyone would run, but when you saw just the lack of leadership that was happening here locally, I think that also motivated a number of people, myself included, who were really concerned on the future of the city, and because of that concern, decided that they would run and provide their leadership to this campaign and for the future of the city of Philadelphia.
Okay. So were you surprised at the amount of money that's come into this race? It's like somewhere in the neighborhood of $22 million.
Well, I knew it was going to be a expensive race, but the amount of money that has already been spent has been, exorbitant. You have some candidates who've already spent upwards of $7 million. Also, I did not think we would have in this race a dark money C4. We have had super PACs before, but we've never had this type of dark money C4 in the race. And based on the findings of the ethics board and their filing with the Court of Common Pleas, also had this type of coordination that we did not anticipate from my perspective. It's one thing if you're going to spend your own money. It's a different thing when you are, coordinating between a dark money C4 and a super PAC in a way that does not provide the opportunity for the voters to really see who are contributing campaign donations on your behalf.
Okay, now for our listeners, what is a C4?
So a C4 is just like you have 501c3s, C4 is a designation in the Internal Revenue Code, Section 501, that allows different types of nonprofit corporations to receive donations. The traditional 501c3 is a traditional charitable nonprofit corporation where you receive donations from individuals, and those individuals that donate to that organization for a charitable purpose can then include that in their taxes. And actually today is tax day. So it's interesting that you asked that question. But you can get a write-off for making that donation to a charitable organization. A C4 is a different type of entity where you are able to make contributions to an organization, but that organization, you do not get a benefit from a charitable purpose for tax purposes, but that organization can also donate, can push a political message as an entity. But there's also very strict rules at the federal and also local level regarding that type of entity. And we will see in a few weeks, Judge Roberts make a decision on the ethics board's filing regarding that type of activity that's happened in this race.
Okay, now when I would go to the forums and cover the 11 billion forums we have had as part of this mayor's race, one of the things that has kind of been top of mind for everybody has been public safety. I guess, have you been talking to the people that you were running against in terms of trying to get them to use some of your ideas regarding public safety, or were you all really that far apart?
Well, I think some of the candidates definitely have different perspectives on how to deal with public safety. I think other candidates are much more closer in alignment regarding the ideas regarding public safety. At this point, I am now no longer a member of city council or candidate for mayor. So I'm a citizen, just like all the other citizens in the city of Philadelphia who are undecided on where we should place our vote for the 100th mayor of the city of Philadelphia. Some would say I'm a citizen at large, and citizen is the most important title we have in a democracy. And so I'll be having conversations with various candidates regarding their perspectives, not only on public safety, but also some of the other real important issues in our city, like education, as well as poverty, and how they will address that in a conversation that will be a little more in depth than what we've had in a 90-second response to a question from a panel or moderator.
Okay. So has anyone approached you about an endorsement?
I'm just like my next steps, I'm keeping all my options open. keeping all my options open in reference to conversations I'm having. I've always been type of person as an elected official that keep an open door policy. So people from all different backgrounds and perspectives, even those I may not be as aligned with, I'm open to have conversations, and I will do my deliberations just like the almost 29, maybe 30% of undecided voters will do as we prepare for the May 16th primary.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm going to give you to Larry McGlynn, my co-host, and you are listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you, Denise. And thank you, Mr. Green, so much for spending some time with us here. One of the things that troubles me the most about this race right now is that you and Maria Cuna Sanchez were two thoughtful members of City Council who had a lot of ideas, and then, based, looking at how the financing of the campaigns went, had a hard time letting people know about your ideas and your thoughts and things that you wanted to do. You were an advocate for some public funding and some different ways of funding campaigns. Ideally, what would this look like in Philadelphia, and how can we make this better in the future?
Well, I think two things are important as we look at not only this race, but also the April 4th race in Chicago. But at least in Chicago, they have runoffs. So you had the incumbent mayor who was not successful in the primary in Chicago, as well as other candidates that decided to run, like Congressman Garcia. And then you had two final candidates, former Philadelphia School Superintendent Paul Vallis and Brandon Johnson. So having an opportunity, at least like Chicago, where you have multiple candidates, you have the ability to winnow that field down to a smaller number of candidates. I have been a proponent of ranked choice voting. I've had hearings in City Council regarding that. I've had conversations both in the House and Senate with members of those bodies regarding ranked choice voting. That's something I think coming out of this process, we as a Commonwealth should look at as a way to make sure we have more people involved in the political process. I think the most recent poll I saw either on MSNBC or CNN talked about how younger voters are more and more likely to become independent. And historically, what happens as younger voters are getting involved in politics or voting, they may register Democrat, Republican, or Independent. But even those who are independent eventually decide to become Democratic or Republican. What's happening now is that people are staying independent, and then based on the various candidate, they may vote Democrat in this election or Republican in that election. And because we have closed primaries, that means that in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and more specifically here in the city of Philadelphia, whoever wins the Democratic primary, more likely than not will be the next mayor of the city of Philadelphia, and also more likely for the next 8 years. So if you're someone and a younger voter that is, interested in getting involved in politics, that makes a statement. And so having some of those reforms, and then also how we enable those who are running for office to communicate to voters, and the cost of doing so is important. It's gotten more and more challenging because of the way you have to communicate in such a large city like Philadelphia. So the ideas of public financing of campaigns are something that I will continue to advocate for. And I think coming out of this election, there will be a stronger cry from constituents, I think both for public financing of elections as well as ranked choice voting.
Yeah. So one of the questions, and I'm also very interested in this as well, so it's nice that it all fits together. People want to know what it's like to actually run for mayor. How does that work? So take us back to the beginning. What was it like for you to make that decision? What had to be in place for you to say, yes, I'm going to do this now?
So this was not an easy decision, although I've had people for years saying, when are you running for mayor? From some of my colleagues when I was the president of Democratic municipal officials, some of my executive board members are current mayors, and kept saying, when are you running for mayor? To other roles I've served in, both as executive committee member of the National League of Cities, and even here in Pennsylvania as president of the Pennsylvania Municipal League, and then also people around the city. But running for this type of race is a very humbling perspective. And I remember reading Barack Obama's book, and I do a lot of summer reading. And that was one of my summer reads, I think the year before last. And it takes a certain level of confidence, but also fear. It's a combination of both. You have to be sure of yourself that you can do this job. And that takes a mental process to go through, but also fear that, if you win, you now are responsible for 1.5 million change residents and making their lives better. And can you do what's needs to be done in a time of crisis? So those are things you deal with. And as I contemplated a lot of those things, and I remember, a couple Zoom meetings I had with some of my Democratic municipal official colleagues, and because members of that board and my executive committee are elected officials from around the country, we would meet often on Friday afternoons. Like board meetings would typically 4 o'clock our time, but of course that's 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And just hearing some of the ideas of how they were using CARES dollars as a way to move their cities forward. Just hearing more of other things at the national level and how those things were not happening here in Philadelphia. And there's a real frustration I was having and hearing from citizens around the city. And then when the mayor made his statement, July 4th of last summer about not wanting to be mayor, and just thinking about some of the other people who were thinking about running, it just taking all those perspectives and this real reflection and taking some time over summer to make that decision to run for mayor of the city of Philadelphia, a place where I was born. So it was not an easy decision. It was a decision based on a lot of reflection and prayer and conversations, as well as talking with my family as well, because this is an endeavor that is different than running for city council at large. Although I've run citywide, there's a different perspective.
So is the skill set in running for office mutually exclusive from governing? Are there overlaps? How would you describe that?
Well,
they're different things, right?
and you have to have a different perspective to govern than to run. And I've talked to a lot of mayors, and I talked to a lot of our recent mayors, from Michael Nutter to John Street to Ed Rendell, about their experiences and how to make that transition. And it's not an easy transition. We do have a strong mayor form of government, but as mayor, you are often trying to use your skills of persuasion to get people to do certain things, which is not easy. And it's not an easy process. And being mayor, from my conversations with them and others, you really focus a lot more on the servant side of leader, because you have to continue to push and move things forward, even in spite of some of the challenges that are happening. But at the end of the day, a mayor's got to inspire hope. We've had some real difficult issues coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, his horrific gun violence that we're seeing in Philadelphia, over 500 homicides the last 2 years. So you have to inspire hope in spite of all of the challenges, and you have to keep pushing forward, and you have to be willing to be cursed at, screamed at, people being angry at decisions you're making. But I think you have to be strong of your convictions that after you've done the research and thought through, make a decision that you think is the best decision for the citizens of the city of Philadelphia, and be willing to live with that decision. And also, when you make a mistake, be willing to say, hey, I made a mistake. I'm not always going to get everything right, and be upfront and honest. I think that's something that's missing in our public discourse, especially from elected officials who are willing to say, I tried this based on the information I had at the time, thought this was the best decision, but I was incorrect and I made a mistake. You don't see that, I think, in current discourse with elected officials. It's basically, I make a decision, and regardless if that decision is right or wrong, people just double down on that decision and are not willing to say if they made a mistake.
Mhm.
And I think that's a incorrect perspective that does not really show leadership. Now you need to make sure that you're doing all that you can to see that what you tried is actually working. And then sometimes you need to give some initial enough time to see if the idea is working. But if you go through that process and it's really not working, you should be open and honest with citizens. And I say, you know what? I thought this was the best direction, but now we see it was not. And so we're going to course correct.
So what was the day-to-day of the campaign like for you?
So, my days have always been pretty long. I tend to, get up at, let's see, most days I was getting up at 4:45 because I try to get in the gym around 5 o'clock. And most days I was going to bed at 11:30, 12 a.m., which is not good. Now, I've been doing that type of schedule for a long time, so it did not change. But going from get up in the morning, working out, coming home, showering, taking my son to St. Joseph University, Kiddie Center. Then from there, if on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I had an 8:30 call. So often I was on a call in the car while dropping my son off. Then after I dropped my son off, I was probably going to a meeting or going to do call time and then have a meeting around 12, 1 o'clock in between, doing call time after that again. And then I would have 2 to 3 or 4 or 5 events at night till about 10:30, 11 o'clock. Having days, I remember one week in particular where we had, it was, I'm trying to remember what holiday it was. It was I just remember that week we had over the course of 6 days, including Saturday, we had 10 canvas forms. And I shot my 2 commercials at one on that Friday. So, the amount of canvas forms were exorbitant. I mean, I remember 2015, 2019, 2007, and the growth of questionnaires, where at one point, people were using one questionnaire for multiple groups. And that was probably 2007. 2015, they expanded. 2019 expanded even more. Now, this time, the questionnaires were a lot, and the canvas forms were a lot. And because I, as an at-large member of City Council, know a lot of people, I remember groups would reach out to me in December. Hey, we're going to have 3 canvas forms and these dates. Groups are reaching out to me in January saying we're having canvas forms on these dates, all the way up until, I would say about a month ago, or actually 3 weeks ago. Group say, hey, we're doing these canvas forms. I'm like, well, you do realize that back in December, January, these other groups had scheduled a canvas form on this date. And someone say, well, what about this date? Well, that's already booked.
Mhm.
And there were some dates. I tried to make almost every canvas form, but there were 2 forms in particular that I couldn't make because I scheduled something on that date because that was the only date that was available. And then, 3 weeks before the event, someone decided, well, that date looks open, so let's have a canvas form on that night. And I had a conflict, so I couldn't make it. And so that was challenging, just trying to get in all of the questionnaires, because sometimes I would answer questionnaires after the canvas form at like 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock, trying to get them in for that day. And my campaign staff would do a draft and I would go back and revise and make edits and revisions and send it in.
All right. I'd like to turn it back over to Denise Clay-Murray here on Monitor.
Thank you, Larry. I guess my last question for you is, or one of my last questions for you is, are you surprised at the number of people who are still undecided about this race? I mean, the Black Leadership PAC put out a poll that showed that roughly 42% of the city's African American population still doesn't know who they're voting for mayor yet. Are you surprised at that at all?
Not necessarily. I know when I made the decision to suspend my campaign, a number of people that I reached out to said, one, well, I don't know who to vote for. I'm now undecided. I would venture that happened also to some of Maria's supporters. I had some unfortunately said that they weren't not going to vote. And I said, listen, no, you need to vote. And they were like, well, you were the only person I was going to vote for, and now I'm not voting. And I said, well, no, you need to be engaged in the political process. So it is interesting when you have this number of people that have been successful as elected officials citywide running. And I think that also makes it more challenging because you have a lot of people that people have known and seen over the years. And, it's hard to make distinctions in 90-second or 60-second question and answer responses on a stage. And then you have the commercials, which are crafted by the various campaigns to present a certain perspective. So I think I always said this race was going to come down to the end, and it was people, and the winner was going to win based on a strategy that it was able to capitalize and move the needle late. And it's looking that is the case, considering so many people are undecided in reference to who should be the 100th mayor of the city of Philadelphia.
Okay. And I guess my final question for you is, you said you're keeping your options open, but one of the options that I see on Twitter for you in particular is district attorney. There's 3 years before that race begins. Is it something you're considering? Is it something you would want to do?
As I've said to a number of people, and I've heard various perspectives, that someone said, don't be surprised if you see Derek for DA t-shirts in green around the city. I'm keeping my options open. I've spent 20 years in City Hall, from my time as a member of council member Tasco staff to being an elected official. So I'm using this time to really evaluate what's the next step in my career and how I can be the most effective citizen at large here in the city of Philadelphia.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time, and best of luck to you. And we'll be keeping an eye out, on you to see what you do next, and also, we may have you on a time.
All right, we'd like to thank former council member Derek Green for being with us. Denise, we're almost at the end here. What do you got coming on Friday for us?
Well, one of the complaints that I've kind of had throughout, particularly the last part of the campaign, has been the sorry state of campaign messaging. Now, because I'm going to the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists Mayoral Forum tomorrow night, and because this seems to be the pattern, I know that somebody is going to say something incredibly stupid while on the mayoral stump. And all I'm going to remember is that there was once a time where you had people who worked in your press office as a candidate who would not let you do that. So I'm going to write about the sorry state of campaign messaging, particularly in this mayor's race, with a special emphasis on the president of the Chamber of Commerce of Chester, Pennsylvania, Jeff Brown.
That was a line from your column last week, and I love it. So we want to thank former council member Derek Green for being with us. Lance Haver, as always. Next week on the program, we will have representatives from Parks and Rec to tell us what's going on in the summer. So we'll see you next week here on Hall Monitor.